This is Hannibal, the death dealer. But today, you're gonna find out not just about Hannibal and the origins of Hannibal, but about my entire professional wrestling career and personal life, because I am doing a shoot interview with Great North Wrestling. So check it out now and subscribe to this channel, the Hannibal TV, the #1 pro wrestling YouTube channel in Canada.
So I'm here with Devin Hannibal Nicholson, former Canadian champion, Olympic trials silver medalist in amateur wrestling, former Canadian Open winner in grappling, IWA Puerto Rico international champion, two-time WWE Puerto Rico tag team champion, two-time Quebec champion, and two-time Canadian heavyweight champion. Welcome, Devin.
IWA Puerto Rico Intercontinental Champion that I beat Ricky Banderas for.
That's right. And Ricky Banderas, for those who don't know, was actually a TNA wrestler as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and he's in Lucha Underground now, and he feuded with Sting in TNA. He was big in AAA as well. But I beat him.
All right. Well, the first question, so we're going to start off with your amateur wrestling background. You started off in amateur wrestling, which a lot of people might not know. Just talk about your accomplishments and something you've...
Amateur wrestling. Well, I always wanted to be a pro wrestler, so in high school, I began amateur wrestling because I knew that would help me, and I did pretty well. We became state champion, which is provincial champion here in Canada. Also became national champion, and later on was the Olympic trials silver medalist for the London Games. So I had a pretty good amateur wrestling career. Was also on the national team, junior national team in 2001. I won the junior national team trials in Vancouver.
And how did you get into pro wrestling?
Pro wrestling, well, I actually had several scholarships out of my amateur wrestling days. One to the university, Simon Fraser University in BC, and the other to the university at Buffalo in the United States. But I actually was going to go to Simon Fraser in the end, but between the time I was supposed to start school and the time I finished high school, a new show came out, was in development, called Mat Rats. WCW had just closed. WWE was still extremely popular, and Eric Bischoff was working with the Hart family to develop this new MTV-ish kids wrestling show out of Calgary. The Hart family was in it. Ted Hart was the main star. Natty Neidhart was in it, who's Natalia now. TJ Wilson, Rene Dupree was in it. He went on to have a WWE career. Rick Vicker was in it as well. They were looking for young kids that were high performance athletes to apply to be on this show. They had done 2 pilots. The pilots looked very professional. I sent in videos of my amateur wrestling, told them I'd always wanted to be a pro wrestler. They flew me in 3 weeks before their 3rd TV pilot that Eric Bischoff was there for, Joey Styles was there for, ECW had just closed. Maura Ranello was actually the main commentator for the original Mat Rats pilot as well, and he went on to, now he's working for WWE and became a great MMA commentator. So it all seemed very professional. They paid for my flight and everything, and the 3 weeks training I had before my first match kind of made me fall in love with wrestling. I was trained for that period by TJ Wilson and Ted Hart. And they told me that I should move to Calgary and that the show was bound to be picked up. And with all the people involved in it telling me that it was going to be picked up, I had no reason to doubt it, being, I think I was 17 at the time still. So I moved to Calgary, ended up hanging around doing some training for 3 months, 3 or 4 months or so. I turned down my scholarships, of course, which was really stupid in retrospect. But yeah, I turned those down to become a pro wrestler because I thought this pilot was going to get picked up. In the end, it did not get picked up, and I ended up running out of money because I was just out of high school and had been a pretty much full-time amateur wrestler in high school, so I didn't have a part-time job. So I had to go back to the other side of Canada. For those of you that don't know Canada, Alberta, where Calgary is located, is near Montana, and Ottawa, where I am from, is near Syracuse, New York, upstate New York. So it's quite a distance. So I had to travel back, and during that time when I was saving money, I began training with Jacques Rougeau Jr., who is a former WWE Intercontinental Champion and I believe 3-time WWE Tag Team Champion. There was a fourth, but WWE didn't count it, unfortunately. It was only seen in Montreal. But so I was traveling back and forth. Montreal's a 2-hour commute from Ottawa, and training with Jacques Rougeau, learning my craft there.
So at the age of 17, you had a lot going for you. You had a lot of opportunities, and you mentioned that you turned down your scholarships, and you said in retrospect that was a bad move. How would you do things differently now with your current mindset versus when you were 17 years old?
At that time, Brock Lesnar was still in OVW. He hadn't really exploded, and WWE's recruiting system really wasn't that known. It seemed like a lot of wrestlers on TV were polished professionals that had been professionals ever since they were kids. But little did I know, which I've now found out, that WWE has scouts at all the NCAA Division I major tournaments now, and scouts amateur tournaments and amateur wrestlers. So if I had just stuck with amateur wrestling, which I actually liked, but I love professional wrestling more, I probably would have just been signed to a developmental contract before ever pro wrestling, but I didn't take that route. And in retrospect, that was a mistake because I've just been a pro wrestler ever since. I never got my education other than an education in pro wrestling. So if you're not working for WWE, there really isn't much money in the independent wrestling leagues. So I definitely regret that. And I also, of course, later in my life got the bite for amateur wrestling again, and that's when I went on to become an Olympic trials silver medalist, because I still always had that amateur wrestling bug in me, so I'm a little disappointed that I didn't follow it through.
And when you were in Mat Rats, your thoughts on Eric Bischoff during that period?
Oh, Eric Bischoff, it was really cool because I was, as I said, I just finished high school the month before, and WCW had closed in March of 2001. This was July of 2001, so Eric Bischoff was fresh off TV, so it was almost surreal seeing him, and he gave us several speeches. One of the speeches, he basically said everyone always told him that in WCW he was using all old wrestlers, and he was going to go the opposite route and use the youngest wrestlers possible this time, so people would never accuse him of that again. So it was kind of cool to see the speech from him, and it was a situation where we had practiced a match numerous times because I wasn't a trained wrestler. Most of us weren't. So he had watched some of the matches along with his partner, Jason Hervey from Wonder Years, who I had watched Wonder Years. So both Bischoff and Hervey were giving us some advice on what to do on the TV pilot. So that was pretty cool. So
you wrestled Tyson Kidd, and you knew Natalya quite well. What are your matches with them like? What were they like?
Well, I only played around with Tyson Kidd and Mat Rats. We did like a skit together, which was an in-ring skit. Natalya was only ring announcing for Mat Rats then. Later on, when I ended up training in the dungeon, that's when I had a lot of experience because both of them were training down there at that time. Even though TJ was already a trained wrestler, he would still go down there to watch the training and participate in it, doing moves to us, and then everyone had matches at the end. He would participate in matches. So in the Mat Rats days, I didn't know them as well as I did later on, but I liked them. I accidentally split TJ's jaw open in Mat Rats, and he didn't like me for that at first by accident, but that was a pure accident, and obviously you're not going to learn how to wrestle in 3 weeks of training, and that was a little mistake I made.
And you also wrestled the British Bulldog's son, Harry Smith. What was that like?
Yeah, when I wrestled TJ and Harry, it was in my Stampede days. He was good. He was a very good wrestler. We actually had a dungeon match once that we filmed, and I still have to locate that tape, but I would like to find that because that was pretty cool. But yeah, he's a good wrestler, and I'm happy that he's doing well for himself in New Japan.
And you mentioned training with the Mountie, Jacques Rougeau, who's one of your trainers. What was that like?
Well, I was a big fan of Jacques Rougeau and the Quebecers, and of course the fabulous Rougeau brothers, and they had some pretty great theme music there. But in this area in particular, the Rougeau brothers were very popular, so it was pretty cool being trained by him. And again, there the training was pretty similar in some ways to Mat Rats, where Jacques only did a few shows a year, and you would just train how to do these matches. So although I was getting some practice and some showmanship skills, I wasn't learning how to call matches on the fly. So I did eventually, at the same time I was living with my parents, I saved up enough money after about a year to move to Calgary, and that's when I actually enrolled in the dungeon, where I knew from the few Stampede matches I had before I left Calgary that you have to call on the fly, and I didn't know that working with Jacques, although I did pick up some skills there.
So we're going to get into the dungeon, and before we do, how did you end up meeting Jacques Rougeau? How did you end up getting involved with him?
Jacques, well, there wasn't very many schools around here with anyone with any reputation, and Jacques Rougeau had been promoting his own independent shows for years in this area, and I would beg my friends' parents or my parents to drag me to these events. So I had met Jacques a few times at his events, and I knew he had a school, so I always talked to him about the school. And one of the times he gave me his number. At that time, I was only 16 or 15, and at that time, now it's changed. He's training very young kids, but he told me to call him when I was 18, so I had still kept his number, so I just called him up, and he told me to come down to the school. So.
Was Kevin Steen, who's better yet known as Kevin Owens in WW, was he training with Jacques at that time?
Yes, Kevin was with Jacques at that time. He had been with him for a couple of years, I believe, at that point. Yeah, he was around.
What are your thoughts on Kevin?
I don't really know him. The only time I knew him was from that school. I never actually wrestled on one show with him since then. I was always talking to Jacques. I was friends with Jacques and Jacques' kids, I guess. And Kevin, to me, looked like your average student, so I just didn't really pay much attention to him. So good for him that he's had some success.
Well, that was my next question I was going to ask. He actually is in WWE right now, currently, and in his first match, he defeated John Cena. What are your thoughts on them bringing him in and his accomplishments?
I don't really follow WWE, so that was the first I've actually heard about that. They need new stars, so they're going to try and throw lots of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. But in my opinion, someone that wears a cutoff t-shirt and basketball shorts is never going to be the next Hulk Hogan, no matter how hard you push it. He doesn't intrigue me enough to watch any of his matches.
So just finishing off with Jacques, what is the most valuable lesson he taught you that stuck with you in your career?
Jacques, the most valuable lesson. He taught me how to sing!
And then you end up going to Stampede, you end up moving from Ottawa to Calgary. And what was it like training in the dungeon that's produced so many great wrestlers over the years?
Yes, well, the first time I was in Calgary, we were training at the Mat Rats studio. They actually had a television studio, so our sessions were there. Although I did wrestle on some Stampede wrestling shows where I basically, quite literally, just got my butt kicked by the veterans because I legitimately had very little training. And in Stampede wrestling, it was not a rich territory. They were running consistently, but not drawing very well. It wasn't uncommon to have 40 or less people at an event. So there were times, in my earlier days, I usually wrestled for free. Eventually it worked up to 20, I think the most I ever made for Stampede Wrestling as just a wrestler was $75. But there were times I remember when they would pay certain of the veterans in change, literally change. So yeah, because of this, sometimes there'd only be 4 matches available for a show or 5 matches available for a show. So we would have to go 20 or 30 minutes. So they would just throw us in there. And a guy like me who really did not know anything about pro wrestling would be fighting this guy that's been through the dungeon or something along those lines, had been around for a while. And they would just beat on me for 20 minutes, give me some offense here or there. But they were fairly hard beatings, but I loved it. I was really happy to be in the Stampede Wrestling ring. But now I came back and I actually joined the dungeon, which that cost money. I had to save up once again, pay to do the dungeon, and then I was actually training at the Hard House and being part of Stampede's regular cards. And at that time, they had 4 Fridays a week in Calgary. They had 2 different venues in Calgary they were running, and then spot shows that they were also running on weekends. So we would wrestle a good amount. And sometimes these spot shows were really far away. Sometimes you'd be driving ridiculous distances in a snowstorm and on icy, dark roads. And literally you'd have to set up the ring, take down the ring, get your butt kicked, and drive home. And you'd be sometimes lucky if you got $20 for that. So you learned how to wrestle. And you learned how to... I wrestled a lot of Broadways, and Bruce Hart was the booker and main trainer in the dungeon.
Did Bruce train you?
Yes, yeah, it was Bruce training me. Stu was still around at that time, but he was not very mobile, and he would just basically be pushed in his wheelchair to just sit at the door and watch, or in the summer they'd have the ring outside sometimes, and he would go out there and watch. Sometimes he would allow someone to put a move on them, and he would demonstrate a move, but he was in his last year. I pretty much finished my time there when they had to sell the house and the dungeon finished.
So Stampede was known for a very hard-hitting style, and it's not what a lot of people might be used to. What's your opinion on that style being employed on young wrestlers?
I like that style, and there was a lot of people that came into the dungeon, and people could always come for 1 or 2 day tryouts to try it out. And very few of those people came back. Of course, everyone had been tortured going in there, and with Bruce it was a little different than Stu. Stu was a pretty good amateur wrestler, knew a lot of holds, so he would submit people or put them in submissions and punish them. Bruce was not the most amateur wrestling inclined. He did know some holds that he would demonstrate from time to time, or have other wrestlers demonstrate on each other, but with him it was mostly, sometimes you'd have to take 60 chops at practice, get slapped in the face 10 times. Practice. There you're learning how to fall on literally pads over cement floor, a basement floor. And you're taking 60 to 100 falls every practice. So that's what I always say to people that get injured from taking bad bumps or something like this, because the way we learned it was very painful, but you had to learn how to fall properly, because the mats were absolutely unforgiving. It wasn't at all like a trampoline. Were very unforgiving, so you had to learn how to fall properly or you wouldn't last long. So the way that they weeded people out of the dungeon wasn't necessarily by cardio, although getting beat on by several veterans for maybe an entire practice, which could last up to 4 hours, sometimes even more than 4 hours, but on average I would say 3 hours. I mean, you'd be weeded out pretty fast, and those veterans had been put through hell, so they wanted to beat on the new people. So that's the way it was, and I'm glad I was trained that way. But you certainly had to be tough to make it through the dungeon, because you just didn't last if you weren't.
So you're known for having very hard-hitting matches. How has training there and learning how to bump properly influenced or impacted your career, basically?
The hard-hitting matches is just, that's the way I learned how to wrestle, and that's the way I like to wrestle. And learning how to fall properly. I'd never had a serious injury from wrestling, and I've been wrestling a long time. I started in 2001. We're now in 2016. So I've never had a bone injury or anything from wrestling other than obviously aches and pains and bruises and cuts and pain like that, but no serious injuries from not knowing how to wrestle properly.
So you mentioned the houses weren't the biggest in Stampede. What were some of the biggest houses they drew?
The biggest one they drew that I ever wrestled on there was probably 450, when that was a really big one. So those were in the definitely the dying days of Stampede wrestling, but there were good wrestlers. Johnny Devine was there, as we mentioned. TJ, Harry Natty, Rick Vicker was there. A lot of great talent. So it was still a learning ground.
Was Jim Neidhart still around that time?
Jim Neidhart would do events here and there. Yes, I remember him being around. He was always a comical character.
Now, what was he like? Do you have any funny stories about him?
I actually met Davey Boy Smith a few times in the locker room at Mat Rats, but he wasn't actually wrestling on those shows. He was just hanging out with his son, Harry, and Georgia, Harry's sister. But I think the first star wrestler, other than Jacques Rougeau, that I'd actually been in a dressing room with was Jim Neidhart. So I guess I'm not going to talk about the advice that he gave me, but he did give me some advice. The first star wrestler to start giving me advice, I guess, he gave that to me on an Indian reserve in Lethbridge, Alberta one night. So I guess he was the first star that kind of advised me.
And during that time, did you have any WWE tryouts?
I started having tryouts actually in 2004 with WWE. And those were, I guess, the Calgary Raw and Kelowna SmackDown. And it was actually Les Thornton, who I believe was a former NWA junior heavyweight champion and Stampede wrestler. He lived in Calgary. He was British, but he married a Calgarian. I knew a guy from the gym that was friends with his wife's family, so I got in contact with him through this mutual friend. And then Les kind of befriended me, and I would go to his house and we would hang out. He'd give me tapes of his to borrow, of his old matches and things like this. And he was a shooter, so he actually taught me some shooting holds, but also advised me. And of course, he was the one that actually called WWE to give me my first tryouts, and they had enough respect for him that they put me right through.
And what were those tryouts like?
Those were cool. To be honest, I may not have been the most polished at that point, 2004, but pretty much all we did at those tryouts were I was a tackling dummy for Batista for the Raw, and then Tyson Tomko, that was the day that he was going to make his Raw debut, and I just remember...
The problem solver.
Yeah, but the only thing I really remember is we kept practicing that kick because he was supposed to interfere in a match with Christian that night, and we kept practicing this kick over and over again, and we were just the extra guys taking it. And just because he seemed to be overthinking it a lot, I knew in my head that he was somehow going to screw it up that night, and lo and behold, he fell when he gave the kick on Raw, and I don't think his career ever recovered from that. Now, I have no issue. I like the guy, actually, because I actually met him a few times later in other dressing rooms. But, yeah, it was just a feeling I had, just the amount of times we practiced that kick, that it just, something was going to happen, and it turned out to be right.
So around that time, what a lot of people might not know is you actually wrestled 2 televised matches, one with Eugene and one with Heidenreich.
Yeah, what actually ended up happening was I had those 2 tryouts. Everyone encouraged me to keep going back. They went well from that standpoint, but I never actually was used as anything but a tackling dummy. And then I had sent some more tapes, and by this time, Tommy Dreamer was head of talent, developmental talent, and he took a liking to me, and he kept sending me to try out to TV tapings, not only in Canada, in Western Canada, but also Eastern Canada, and also some in the States. And yeah, I did have a match on SmackDown against Heidenreich, and another one on Heat in Las Vegas against Eugene. Yeah, so that was cool. I really loved being in the ring for that. That was a lot of fun, and of course, I just thought from being in the independents that those guys had it so great with the catering, and just so you didn't even have to buy your own wrist tape or oil. They had a whole thing laid out there that you could grab it. And yeah, they were positive experiences for sure.
Now, how did they treat you when you were there?
Everyone was fairly friendly. The only thing that I would possibly do differently now is I was more shy back then, and I don't think that I introduced myself to some people because I was kind of in awe of them or I didn't know what to say to them. And I think that might come off to some people as arrogance, and I now know the importance of you got to shake everyone's hands, but that's something that they really didn't teach us in the dungeon, because the Hearts always like were the promoters' sons and they ran their own company, so I guess the importance of making a good impression when you go to places wasn't one of the main things that they taught. And yeah, but other than that, it was just bad luck, I would say. I never received any negative feedback on my matches. Everything seemed to go well, but all the only feedback I had was keep trying, keep calling, keep coming back more. So that's what I did.
So the next thing you did was actually you ended up working for IWA in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
How did you end up there?
I wanted more experience, because that's one of the things I think Tommy Dreamer told me, get more experience wrestling in other places, and Lance Storm as well, because I was also training in Calgary a bit with Lance Storm when he was just opening up his school, and it was mostly beginners classes, but sometimes he would have advanced classes, and he was just talking about the importance of learning in other places and traveling around. So I sent tapes off to many different places, and then I got a call back about going to Puerto Rico full time. And at that time, Puerto Rico was still a pretty popping territory. It had 2 companies, 6 hours of TV a week. Both companies were drawing pretty good houses, but IWA was definitely winning. They had sometimes 6,000 or 7,000 for their big events, and 1,500 to 3,000, I would say, was an average Saturday night TV taping, and we wrestled 4 days a week. So, and yeah, I got experience in front of the TV, being on TV and wrestling full time. So that was a lot of fun. And I got to miss winter for a couple of years, which I also really enjoyed.
And you mentioned Lance Storm, and Lance is known as a trainer, and he never really got as far in his career as a lot of people thought he could. What are your thoughts on Lance Storm?
I believe he made his money. He had a good run in WCW. That was probably his most successful run when they made him the head of Team Canada. He was a good wrestler. He was always nice to me. I did work with him once on a show capacity, but also from all my dealings with him, I liked him. I have no issues with him.
And is it true that Bushwhacker Luke Williams is the one that actually gave you the Hannibal name?
Yes, he did, because that was one of the things they always loved to rib you and Stampede, and I don't know.
You had some bad names.
Yeah, they gave a lot of people bad names, and this was particularly Bruce over the years when he was a booker, giving people bad names. Now, I don't know for sure if he was doing this purposely because he thought they were bad names. Maybe in his mind he thought they were good, but he called me Kid Nichols, which I always hated because I was always big. I was always pretty damn big, so I didn't look like a kid. And my last name is Nicholson, not Nichols. So everyone, I just despised the name. And of course, when I sent my tapes in Puerto Rico, they said that name is not going to go well here. And they said basically Abyss had just been signed by TNA. I was pretty much taking Abyss's place. And the movie Silence of the Lambs was always popular there, and dark characters, Vampiro was very popular there, so I said, we want to call you Hannibal. So that's how I got the name.
So you got to work with some pretty big stars there, such as Savio Vega and Miguel Perez. What were those like?
I always got along with Savio. Miguel, I worked with him a few times. He was very nice. I just liked about them that their pay was never late. They were very professional in all their dealings with me, and those were some of the best years of my life living there. So, while working for IWA, wasn't always the same for the other company, but definitely enjoyed my time in IWA.
And your thoughts on working with Invader One?
Invader One. You see, when I first went to Puerto Rico, it was before the internet really took off. YouTube, I didn't know. I don't know if it existed because I really never even discovered YouTube until I had finished my whole run in Puerto Rico. Because this was before the time where you even had like text messaging was just starting. You could watch real videos on the phone. And when I lived in Puerto Rico, you'd have to go to an internet cafe to get on the internet. So I only knew very limited what happened with Brody at that time, and I didn't know much about Brody because, as I said, there was no YouTube, so I'd only heard about him. I always hated Invader. I always found him arrogant. I never shook his hand. I never. That wasn't necessarily because I hated him. That was just, again, I hadn't been taught good manners at the start, but as I went on, I did start shaking everyone's hand, but I never felt the urge to shake his hand, and I never liked Invader or respected him.
So you mentioned Bruiser Brody, and what are your thoughts on Bruiser Brody? How do you look? How do you look at him? Like, how do you look up to him? And how has he impacted your career?
Well, as I was in Puerto Rico more, I actually learned about him because I became friends with a lot of people in Puerto Rico, and Bruiser Brody was obviously a huge star there. So I learned all about Bruiser Brody. And then when I switched to WWC Puerto Rico, they sold the DVD of Bruiser Brody's best matches, which I'm sure they never gave a cut to Brody's wife, but the ad would always play on the WWC TV show. So the ad of all the highlights for this DVD always intrigued me. Then I was starting to learn about him, and then I knew this. I learned the story as I was there of what happened. And in WWC, we actually wrestled quite often, actually, for big shows in that stadium where he was killed, and I was a heel, so I was in the heel dressing room, and I never even could look in that shower. I was always really sickened being in there. And that was, again, before I even really became the massive fan now that I am of Bruiser Brody. But I just remember being in there. I would always just imagine what it would be like that night. So, yeah, it's pretty bad what happened to him. I just can't imagine people just sitting there lacing up their boots while someone bleeding to death on the dressing room floor. That just sickens me. And it's just sad that Invader wrestled later that night and ended up remaining on his booker and never was punished for doing what he did to Bruiser Brody. So as I learned more, I became a fan of his, read his wife's book. It just bothered me more and more and more. And I don't even... I hate Invader so much now. I don't even know what would happen if I ever ran into him again. And I just think it's a travesty of justice that even the company was not punished, because it's very bizarre that this was the booker, a man in a power position working for the company. The murder took place in a dressing room of the company. The company still let the guy wrestle later in the night that killed him. So it was just it's a disturbing situation, and as long as I interview wrestlers, I'm always going to ask about Bruiser Brody, because I just want his legacy to live on. And I hope that one day, I don't care if it's in Jose Gonzalez's dying days, I hope that he is brought to justice. And I hope that word gets out about this enough, that he's not considered a hero in Puerto Rico anymore, because he was considered a hero there for a long time, and he really shouldn't be, because he's really a piece of scum. I hate him.
All right, so what was it like feuding with Ricky Banderas for the IWA Intercontinental Championship?
The feud with Ricky Banderas and IWA was probably my first big feud I ever had. Like, we drew big houses, we were in main event matches. Ricky Banderas is one of the most over wrestlers in modern day Puerto Rico wrestling. I would say even more over in Puerto Rico than probably Carlito, despite Carlito's WWE accomplishments. I think Ricky can draw a bigger crowd than Carlito, definitely, and he's been very successful. I enjoyed the feud with him. I don't think it's over. We will have other matches to come. But yeah, it was interesting feuding with him. That was my first long-term feud with someone. We wrestle each other all the time for almost a year.
Would you want to wrestle again and in the future again and bring that back? And
that would be a good series of matches now. Yeah, that would be good. Very good. I believe that probably will happen in some form or another, because I don't think he's that old, and I certainly have a long career ahead of me.
So how did you end up switching to WWC Puerto Rico?
What happened was I just really didn't like Invader. That was one of the main things, and the gym that I worked out at is where Eddie Colon worked out, and a lot of actually all the WWC guys worked out, mainly because the gym sponsored WWC, and those wrestlers could work out for free there. So I just became pretty good friends with Eddie, working out at the gym, and I pretty much wanted to make the switch by that point, and they actually offered me more money to switch. This was before I realized, which I didn't learn till much later down the road, that they aren't really, it's not Eddie, it's his father and Victor Richovica. They're not always true to their word on pay. But one thing about WWC Puerto Rico, I got along better with that locker room. And I think it's because IWA, the pay was always on time. It was very like a business. So the wrestlers they all had the egos. I'm not saying egos were good or bad, but they were all kind of acted like stars. But WWC, we were more of a team. And yeah, I liked the dressing room of WWC. I really got along with everybody there.
So you mentioned the Colones, and the Colones have had quite a successful run in WWE. I believe there was 3 of them in there at one point. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, there's Orlando, who's a cousin. I think it's Carlos's brother's son, who I feuded with a lot when he was just starting. Back then, what the heck was his name? I don't even remember what Orlando's name used to be, but we had tons of matches. It may have been Orlando Colon, actually. And, or he could have worn a mask. Anyways, we had a lot of matches, not only in Puerto Rico, but we also even had a match in the Dominican Republic that was pretty good. And I feuded with, had a lot of matches against Eddie and Orlando. I had a tag team partner, Black Pain, there. We won the WWC Puerto Rico Tag Team Championships twice. We were known as Terror Incorporated, and we were a pretty good team. He was a huge, monstrous guy. I would say 6'7", 6'8", 350 pounds, big, monstrous guy. So I think we made a very good team. And he was in WWE developmental for a while, but instead of making him the monstrous Black Pain, they called him Sweet Poppy Sanchez and made him a babyface. So I think that didn't really fit him. But yeah, I think that tag team would still be a good team in the future. Although I think I would like to be a singles wrestler, but we were a good tag team, definitely.
So just to finish with Puerto Rico.
And I would still be, we could have been the tag team champions for a long time, because the only reason we lost our first title reign was because I hadn't been paid for 3 weeks. And they kept delaying it until finally I said I quit. And then on the day, the last taping before I was going back, they finally paid me a wad of money that they owed me. Not all of it, but a good chunk of it. So then I ended up staying, and it was only a matter of weeks before they gave us the titles back. And the only time that I gave the titles up again was because they were just not paying, and there's only so long you can survive out there without getting paid, particularly if you're working. At that time, WWC was 3 or 4 times a week, so you want to get paid. And we were the tag team champions, so they should have taken care of us.
Yeah, they didn't really treat you guys like champions.
No, but there was that issue has been around in that company for a long time, unfortunately. But overall, I really like Puerto Rico, so it's if it wasn't for the pay issues, I would still be there because I loved it there and I loved the fans and I enjoyed wrestling there.
So you wrestled as an amateur wrestler. You went to Calgary. You wrestled in the dungeon. Then you went to Puerto Rico. So what kind of style did you have there? What did you develop when you were there?
Puerto Rico, a lot of them are not tough. They don't like the strong style there. I still had a fairly strong style of wrestling to the point that I don't want to get into the moments, but yeah, there was a few moments there where beatings were given just because of styles differences there. But I think I kept my Calgary style most of the time through Puerto Rico, other than the times that I was wrestling the bigger stars in Puerto Rico, because at that time I was just having the respect to adapt to their style.
So we're going to switch gears here, and we're going to talk about Billy Graham, superstar Billy Graham, who's been a pretty big part of your life for the last couple of years. What's your relationship like with Billy Graham, and how did you meet him?
Billy Graham, actually, I met him because later on, we won't get into this too much, there was a movie on it called This Is Hannibal, a documentary. It won 3 awards. Basically, I finally did get a WWE contract after years of toiling away at learning my craft, 8 years actually, lots of hard work. And it ended up being taken away due to me, unfortunately, having the hepatitis C virus active in my system, which it is not anymore, but at that time it was. So I wasn't cleared by WWE Talent Relations for my contract to go through. Went through one treatment to be cured of the disease. It was a standard treatment covered by the Canadian government. It was pretty terrible on me. I won't get into the details. You can watch the movie if you want to know the details. This Is Hannibal. It's on YouTube. Just type it in. But I went through a terrible treatment after losing my contract. It appeared like the treatment was going to work while I was on the treatment. You had to wait until 6 months after the treatment to find out whether it worked or not. And it didn't work in the end. So I was devastated. I thought my life was ruined. I was suicidal. I did not want to live. And at one point, one of the people that I was training, who I had a lot of respect for, he had a medical degree and a law degree, he said, well, your life is... At this time, I wasn't public about having hepatitis C because I was ashamed of it. And he just basically said, your life is pretty shitty right now. Why don't you go public about it? Because after the first treatment didn't work, my doctor at that time, my hepatitis C specialist, told me it was going to be another 5 to 8 years before a new treatment would come out that he would put me on. So at that time I was 28, another 5 to 8 years, that would definitely be my best wrestling years behind me. So this friend of mine from the gym, who I personal trained, suggested that I just go public about my case, because if I went public about it, maybe someone will come out of the woodwork to help me. So I ended up going public about it, but when I wanted to go public about it, I made a video to go public about it. So because the way I caught it, that was proven in court that it was transmitted, was actually from being cut with a hepatitis C infected razor blade in a professional wrestling match by another wrestler, Abdullah the Butcher, Larry Shreve, without my permission or consent. And no, that's not a normal risk of going into a professional wrestling match. You don't expect to be cut with a hepatitis C infected razor blade with fresh hepatitis C infected blood on it multiple times in a professional wrestling match. That's just not an accepted risk. And if that were to happen as an assault on the street, you'd be arrested and you'd be in jail. So I wanted to come out as credibly as possible about this, so I got some interviews with some professional wrestlers that I had become friends with over the years, such as the Honky Tonk Man and Lanny Poffo. And there were some other wrestlers in there who I'd worked with, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Sylvain Grenier. I think there was even footage of me amateur wrestling with Olympic gold medalist for Canada, Daniel Legally, in the first video I put out to kind of tell very briefly my story of how I had hepatitis C and how at that time I believed I caught it, because at that time I didn't prove it in court yet. It still took me a good year of a legal battle just to get Abdullah's hepatitis C positive genotype 2 blood results. But how I met Billy Graham is because I had heard from being a wrestling fan and reading his book and watching his DVD and knowing all about him, that he had a liver transplant due to hepatitis C. So, and I knew that he had gone through a lot of suffering due to hepatitis C, so I thought he would be a good person to talk to be part of this documentary. And also there's a story in his book of Abdullah from Billy Graham's Stampede Wrestling days, where Billy saw him cut up an Indian wrestler. Billy refers to him as Indian, Native American, whatever you want to call it, but he wasn't even a wrestler, basically just some random so-so trained person from Alberta got in the ring with Abdullah, and as Abdullah often did with young wrestlers or people that didn't know what they were doing, he just sliced this guy to bits. So Billy told the story of witnessing something that he found very disturbing about Abdullah, so I thought, well, Billy might be a good person to talk to for this. So I ended up getting in contact with him for the documentary, and when he heard about my story, he really sympathized with me. And then he saw some of my wrestling matches, and he even sympathized with me more because he found me entertaining as a wrestler. But we really had that hepatitis C connection, and he sympathized with me so much that he eventually ended up getting me a doctor's appointment with his liver specialist, who was Dr. Hector Rodriguez, who's based in Phoenix, Arizona, who's a world-renowned liver expert. And he took a look into my hepatitis C situation, which I was told in Canada there would be no medical cure for 5 to 8 years. This is about a year or two after I was told this, that I flew to Phoenix, had the test done, and this doctor recommended a new experimental treatment called Incivec triple therapy. It had been effective on genotype 1 patients, so it might be worth trying on me. He was testing it on other genotype 2 patients. It wasn't approved, but he believed it would work. So he suggested that I do this. I took the findings back to Canada, took it to a second opinion liver specialist. That liver specialist conferred with some other liver specialists from around the world. She's Dr. Linda Scully from the Ottawa Hospital, another world-renowned liver specialist. She said it wouldn't be covered by the government, but she would put me on this experimental treatment. I then went through a hellacious 36-week treatment that was by far the worst 36 weeks of my life, without question. The side effects I underwent were horrible. And just to fast forward a little bit, that treatment, it was effective on me. After 6 months of being off the treatment, going through all that hell, literally fighting day to day not to kill myself along that treatment because the side effects were so bad, and literally not only the medical side effects of the treatment, but the effects of having to be off work, not earning money while on that treatment, and the cost of the medication, which ended up being the equivalent to around $80,000, was just so much stress and pressure on me. And I had friends turn their backs on me during that time. One of my workplaces actually terminated me from my job, even though I was on sick leave during that time. So my world was just crumbling, but I fought through it. And yeah, I did end up being cured, so that was great. Very great accomplishment. But because the side effects were so bad for this medication, it was never actually ever approved for genotype 2 to my knowledge. let alone approved in Canada, and it was taken off the market. So it's not even on the market anymore. For one reason, because it's too expensive for most people to afford. The other reason, the side effects are so terrible, which one of the things that got me through the treatment was I did weekly updates. And since I was public about hepatitis C, I posted the updates every week on YouTube. And other people who had been through the treatment and other people with the disease were watching them and supporting me, talking to me along the way, giving me tips of how to deal with the side effects. So I had a lot of support, some good friends and some great family members supporting me. So I really, everything helped for that second treatment. And Billy Graham, of course, he helped me through. At one point, I actually I couldn't sleep anyways. One of the side effects for the medication was you can't sleep, that's just one side effect, is not being able to sleep. So try staying awake for sometimes maybe only sleeping 10 or 12 hours in a whole week. Try to see how you'll feel on that, let alone all the medical side effects, like the never-ending itching and the bug under the skin itching. So many horrible side effects, the 45-pound weight loss. But anyways, at one point I even drove to Phoenix, literally not even sleeping, drove across the country of the United States to see Billy Graham. So that was actually the highlight of my treatment, because the lowest part of the treatment was he almost passed away during the treatment too at one point. So that was the toughest part of the treatment. I could not have got through it without him. So thank God that he lived, because he was with me every day, keeping me motivated through that.
And Billy right now is actually having some health issues himself. Do you have any updates on that?
Billy, his wife Valerie is pretty ill right now. Billy's hips are bothering him. He needs a cane to get around. He's getting along with a lot of pain. His knees are bone on bone. He has hepatitis C. He had a liver transplant, I think, in 2002, 2004. Most people only live 10 years past a liver transplant. The reason why he's lived so long is because the liver he had was an 18-year-old girl that was in a car accident liver. So it was a very fresh liver, pure liver. So yeah, that's one of the problems he has, hepatitis C. He has his injuries. Then he has diabetes. Then he has arterial fibrillation. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, of the heart. So yeah, he's in a lot of pain, but he's a survivor, and he's staying alive. And WWE re-signed to a Legends contract. Now, that's very little money, especially since he can't do any autograph appearances right now due to his health. They put out a shirt of superstar Billy Graham, so if you want to give him some type of support, he does get a small percentage, I believe, of his shirt sales. So you could go to the WWE's website and buy his shirts.
So he had a huge impact on your personal life, obviously, and as far as your professional wrestling career, what impact did he have on your character and you as a wrestler?
He gave me the name The Death Dealer. He added the Death Dealer to Hannibal. He's watched many of my promos, almost all of my recent promos since I know him, and he's critiqued them for me. He's watched. Now he's in terrible health, so he hasn't been able to watch as many, but for many years he was watching since I started my comeback into wrestling after being cured. Watched my matches, advised me on matches. He even recently recommended me to WWE. Unfortunately, for reasons he nor I know, that didn't work out, but he's definitely tried to get me into WWE. So he's really helped me professionally, and of course he was a bodybuilder, so he always gives me fitness advice as well.
And just to finish off the hepatitis C subject, you end up being cured finally, and you actually end up winning a lawsuit against Abdul the Butcher. What what are your thoughts on this versus having a WWE contract?
Well, it's quite funny because the lawsuit that we won in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, he was found guilty of negligence, assault, and battery. Negligence, of course. He has a history of Hep C, but whether you have Hep C or not, you know that cutting someone with a razor blade with blood on it is dangerous. So it's definitely negligent to do that. Assault, he definitely cut me without my permission. And of course, battery as well. So that's what he was found guilty of, and the judgment was recently upheld in the state of Georgia, as if it was a judgment in the United States. So yes, the award was 2.3 million, but you have to remember that I've paid thousands in legal fees so far, and of course, the lawyers get a cut of that, and he's yet to pay it as well. And but basically, compared to a WWE contract where the highest paid guy is making the millions a year, but more than that, it was my lifelong dream, and I at least wanted a shot at the big time, at least a shot after all my hard work to see if I would make it or not, at least a chance. No amount of money can replace that. That's what my lifelong goal is. Now I do work in the wrestling business, but it's not a living. I still have to have other employments. I don't have an education. My jobs are not the highest paying. So I did lose out on the opportunity to possibly become a superstar. And whether I would have or not, I never got the chance. So that's all I have to say. No amount of money is worth losing that opportunity to a person like me who has never wanted anything more than to be a WWE wrestler.
So you actually retired from wrestling when you still had the disease. You end up being cured, and then after 3 years, you end up making a return. What made you return to wrestling?
What made me come back? I love pro wrestling, and I got healthy again, and it's my calling in life to wrestle. So I'm always going to wrestle as long as I can, I suppose. That's why I came back to it. I love it.
And you actually end up having a match versus AJ Styles in your 2014 comeback year. He's now in WWE. He's a big star. What was that match like? What are your memories of that match?
I was really happy to get that match because I'm a big New Japan Pro Wrestling fan, and I always think some of the greatest wrestling, even to this day, is still in that company. And at the time of that match, he was IWGP champion, which is the champion of New Japan. So that was a big honor for me to wrestle that person like that. I had been on cards with AJ in the past. He's not the type of wrestler I'm a fan of. I do respect his wrestling ability. I think he's a tremendous wrestler, without a doubt. But for me, why I liked that match and why it was special to me was because he was the champion of New Japan at that time. So I got to wrestle the IWGP champion, which I hope I get to wrestle another IWGP champion in the future. And I'm sure you'll see me against AJ again. There's unfinished business between us.
And that match has been seen by over 100,000 people and is available on YouTube, and you can actually check it out on the Hannibal TV YouTube page.
Yeah. There's a short and a long version.
That's right, there's two versions. Yeah. So what are your memories on the actual match itself with AJ?
The match itself, it was an interesting match for sure. We didn't really get along in the match, I would say. But I think in the end, from what I understand, he was willing to wrestle me again. So I think in the end, when he saw it got over 100,000 hits, the feedback from the fans was tremendous. He was willing to go at it again, despite it was a very realistic match at certain times. for sure.
And in the last couple of years, you've been wrestling some big names, not just from wrestling, but also from UFC. You actually ended up wrestling UFC legend Dan the Beast Severn. What was that match like?
Well, there's a guy that I really wanted to wrestle, and it might not be over between us. There was a bit of an interesting ending to that. I did defeat him, but he wants a rematch, and I may just have to grant him that rematch because I have so much respect for him. But as a guy that's followed MMA from the beginning, I was actually a fan of Dan Severn, and on an event outside of Calgary during my Stampede days, he actually managed me once. So I did meet him back then, and the knowledge that I was able to suck up from him then was really useful to me. So to actually wrestle him in a match that I believe has like 25,000 or so views, I was really happy. And it was a good match. He's a very tough guy. There's no question he's tough.
And earlier this year, you got to wrestle Al Snow, who's renowned as a professional wrestling trainer and wrestler. He's been wrestling since 1982. What was that experience like wrestling with Al?
Al Snow, he's an interesting fellow for sure. He has unique perspectives on the wrestling business that young professional wrestlers should listen to, and we have been he actually did a couple seminars while he was here wrestling for Great North Wrestling, and they're on the Hannibal TV, this YouTube channel. So if you're an aspiring wrestler or a young wrestler, I would suggest watching those, taking his advice, and here's some advice to a young wrestler, and you don't even have to listen to me. Take my advice with a grain of salt, because I have not actually become WWE champion yet. So, but my advice is only listen to people that have made it. That's what I would have to say, because there's a lot of people out there on the independent scene giving bad advice. Don't listen to advice if you don't think it's good, or if it's from someone that hasn't made it. Always take it with a grain of salt. Get numerous people's advice, because there are some people out there that give bad advice.
And since returning to the ring, what's your favorite match been?
That's a tough one. Possibly the Dan Severn match was probably my favorite. I'm glad I survived the tables, ladders, and chairs match without breaking my leg. I'm really upset at how that ended, but I got my revenge. That one's on YouTube as well. That was just a brutally hard-hitting match, the tables, ladders, and chairs match. But my best matches are yet to come. I'm wrestling Rick Steiner next, November 5th in Hawkesbury for Great North Wrestling. So I'm sure that's going to be definitely one that's going to go down in the history books. And I'm going to keep my title.
And if you were to have a dream opponent, if you could face anybody, past or present, who would you pick, and why?
Definitely Brock Lesnar for sure, because I don't like him. I really don't like him. In fact, I despise him as a person, but I respect him. I admire him, but I don't like his personality. I don't like his views on professional wrestling and how everything is. The rule book is out the window for him. He just really doesn't have much respect for the wrestling business, and I find that from the matches I've seen of his, he bullies a lot of the wrestlers he wrestles, because quite frankly, a lot of the people he's in the ring with would just get destroyed by him in a real fight. So I think I would fight back a lot more and be able to hold my own, because I'm not afraid of him at all. And yeah, he's the biggest star right now, I would say, other than The Rock, who wouldn't want to wrestle The Rock. But I think for animosity purposes, and I just think our styles would go well, and I'd fight him in MMA. I don't care. I don't care. I would take Brock Lesnar on either way.
And a lot of your fans actually have always requested to see Hannibal versus Kurt Angle. That's been a big thing in the past. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think it'll happen in Canada. I'm not sure if he's allowed to come to Canada anymore. And that's nothing against Kurt. I wish you could come to Canada. And if you can come, I think it will happen. Definitely, probably in Great North Wrestling in the future. Otherwise, I may have to come down to the U.S. And I do respect Kurt Angle. I admire him. I had an issue with him. I won't even get into it, but I had a past issue with him when he made the big deal that he was going to make an Olympic comeback and he didn't bother doing the Olympic trials. The year that I actually was the Olympic trials silver medalist for Canada, I had a problem with him that year because he motivated me. He was someone that I looked up to, and I would like to wrestle him one day. So yeah, but definitely Brock's on the top of my list, higher than Kurt Angle, because Brock's still in his prime. Not to say that Kurt Angle, not in his prime, is not better than 99% of any of the top wrestlers in the world in their prime, because he's such an amazing athlete.
And going back to WWE, you had a Tough Enough submission video where you actually submitted for Tough Enough, and the video actually made it on to SmackDown. And at one point, that video became the most watched Tough Enough video on the entire internet. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I actually had some experience for Tough Enough. I made it to the semifinals, I believe, of Tough Enough 3 back when I was really young, around the Matt Rats time. I went to the Colorado tryout, so I thought, what the heck, I was back wrestling again. Why not apply for this latest WWE Tough Enough? What harm could it do? So I decided to make a video, and it ended up exploding. People from all over the world, like news sites from all over the world, were contacting me. Italy, Germany, England, France. It made news everywhere. Everyone loved my video. At one point, yeah, as you mentioned, I think it was the highest viewed for any male, which was pretty good, and they even aired a clip of it on SmackDown. So I thought for a minute, hey, they're airing it on SmackDown. They even added it to the official international entries playlist on the WWE's YouTube channel. So I thought that I was probably going to have a good chance to make it. Got my hopes up. A lot of other people had their hopes up. I actually gained a lot of new fans of it that way, so I appreciate the new fans I gained from that. But unfortunately, I wasn't selected. I don't know why. People say maybe they didn't want any like really seasoned wrestlers, but I don't know. Wouldn't you want the most entertaining people? I don't know. I think I would have been more entertaining than any of the other males they had on that show. And like, look at ZZ, for instance. They hired him out of the show, and he's already been released. So he even had an opportunity before me. So I just wish I had like at least been given an opportunity.
So you've been working on not only your wrestling style but your character for many years. You're Hannibal the Death Dealer professionally, and how has that character evolved over the years from just Devin Nicholson basically wrestling in mat rats?
The character, it's still not at its peak. The real character of Hannibal is a very heelish character, but in Canada, I unfortunately just can't be a heel because I'm not even saying this to be arrogant. I'm probably the most known wrestler in Canada that's not signed by WWE as far as national press, as far as my videos getting lots of hits, being known by the media in Canada. So the fans like me and they know my story and they feel bad for me, so I get cheered. So I can't really turn against them. But one day the true Hannibal character will come out again, whether it's in Japan or the US, and that'll be the one that really goes to the highest level. Because actually, when I was signed by WWE, we touched on it earlier, I was told by Pat Patterson I was the best heel he had seen in years. And in my tryouts, I was playing a heel. And I was a heel in Puerto Rico where I had my most success.
A lot of people say that Devin Nicholson, the person, and Hannibal are not really two separate things, but potentially the same thing. What are your thoughts on people thinking that? Is Hannibal part of your personality, or is it something you play? What's the deal on that? No comment on that? All right, moving on. So what happened in 2014? You had a tryout in Iowa. What was that like?
It was a tryout to get a tryout in NXT, and it was Gerald Briscoe and Jim Ross that were scouting that tryout on behalf of the WWE, and they told me out of that tryout that they were going to recommend me to WWE, particularly Gerald Briscoe told me this, and he told me I'd be hearing back that September if I was accepted or not, but he personally was going to put me through for an NXT tryout. I never heard back, and yeah, that was the year after that, that was July 2014, August 2015. Ric Flair attended a Harley race camp that I was at, and he was attending for a day on behalf of the WWE, and I did that tryout. There was only 2 matches. I was in one of those 2 matches, and he said at the end of that seminar that he was going to recommend 4 people to the WWE, and I talked to him later that night at the event that Harley Race put on, and I asked him just his advice, and he told me in that conversation that I was going to be one of the 4 people that he recommends. But again, I didn't hear anything back, so unfortunately, nothing came out of those recommendations.
And then you end up having one more tryout this year in 2016.
No, I was supposed to actually have a tryout actually in NXT, paid travel and everything. What happened there was Billy Graham, he's back under a Legends contract now, and he's been telling me all along to stay pushing at WWE. And he got me Gerald Briscoe's cell phone number, and of course, as I just mentioned, Gerald Briscoe told me he was going to recommend me for a tryout in 2014. So Billy said, just call him up and ask whatever happened with that tryout, and offer to send him something new, see if you can get another tryout. And I called him up and reminded him of who I was, sent him some new material, and he said he was going to recommend me for this tryout this past May 2016. Sent him my medical papers and everything. Was later told that I was accepted into the NXT tryout. Was given my itinerary and everything for the tryout. And then just over a week before the tryout, I received an email on a Sunday night at past 11 at night from WWE Talent Relations indicating to me that they're sorry for the confusion, but I'm no longer invited to the tryout. And I received no information other than that, why I was no longer invited after being accepted into the tryout. And I recently saw Gerald Briscoe again in person just last month, and I asked him about what happened, and he said all he does is give the recommendations, and he said he was actually happy when he found out that I was in the tryout, and he has no idea why it was resend. It wasn't even resended, I was just uninvited, I guess is the word. So he doesn't know, and yeah. He said he feels for me on that one, and I believe he's telling the truth. He has no reason to lie to me, so I don't know what happened. Only the WWE office knows, whoever made that decision, someone higher up in the rankings. And Gerald Briscoe, who coincidentally, we were just talking about Brock Lesnar, he was the one that discovered Brock Lesnar. So the guy that, first of all, when I was originally hired, Pat Patterson was the main person out of the tryout camp that I was hired from who recommended me. He's a very well-respected agent in WWE. Then I had Gerald Briscoe recommend me. And those 2 guys can't help me get in. Plus Billy Graham also gave a recommendation to me. Those are some pretty top people in the wrestling business. Supposedly Ric Flair, unless Ric Flair's lying to me, which of course, why would he? I'm nobody to him. He supposedly recommended me too, so I don't know how much better recommendations you can get than those.
Yeah, so WWE doesn't seem, at least not in the immediate future, but do you see yourself maybe wrestling in Japan or possibly TNA?
Japan, I'm pretty sure is bound to happen for me one day. I just don't see it not happening. TNA, I really don't know. I don't know. I've had tryout matches with them in the past. At one point, they were thinking of bringing me in for a feud with Abyss. That was way back in 2007. So I don't know.
In recent years, there's also another league that's opened up, Lucha Underground. Would you be open to going there?
I don't know much about it other than what the people that are in it have told me, since I don't get the channel, but of course I would.
And now, going into shoot interviews, you actually conduct shoot interviews on a regular basis on the Hannibal TV. You interview lots of former wrestlers and current stars, too. Basically, how did you start doing shoot interviews, and how did you get into this?
Well, it all started, I guess, during, for the filming of This Is Hannibal, I guess the director, which is you, coincidentally, was following me around for numerous years, filming interviews, and I was conducting some of the interviews with the stars, because we were also conducting random interviews about wrestling. You were also conducting a lot of them that were about me. And then we ended up having a bunch of extra footage that we threw some of it up on the net for the hell of it, and it seemed like the interviews were becoming very popular, and this is just something that we never thought would be popular. And then we just started doing more and more, and then doing some custom shoot interviews that were just, for instance, when we went to see Jacques Rougeau, my old trainer, we did that one. That one got lots of hits. Then we went to see, of course, my friend Billy a couple times. Those ones were popular. So yeah, it's just been a thing that's grown.
And what's your...
And all the full shoot interviews can be seen on the Hannibal TV. Go to the full shoot interview playlist to watch those.
So you've interviewed
subscribe.
quite a few wrestlers. What's your favorite shoot interview to date?
I wouldn't say I have an absolute favorite. I would say the ones I've enjoyed the most have been the ones that I've done with friends of mine, I guess. So I would say the Billy Graham face-to-face one, which I did while I was on treatment when I actually traveled to Phoenix. That one was really a great one. The one with Jacques Rougeau, the Mountie, that was good because that was completely unscripted. That was just us talking in a barbershop pretty much. And then the most recent one that I really enjoyed was, I guess, Alain Moussi, who is my old martial arts trainer, who's in the new Kickboxer movies. So I'm really happy for him that it appears he's going to go on to be a big star. I mean, Jean-Claude Van Damme is in the movies with him, George St. Pierre, Mike Tyson, Batista, yeah, as you say. So this, Cain Velasquez. So this guy's going to be a superstar. So I was so honored that he would give us an interview despite turning into such a superstar. So for me, that one was a fun one to do too.
And what are your thoughts on LA himself?
I think he's very impressive, and I think he will be a good second coming of Jean-Claude Van Damme, and could even surpass Jean-Claude Van Damme. And he's a great martial artist too.
And what could fans that watch this channel look forward to for the future of shoot interviews on the Hannibal TV?
We're gonna just keep getting. We're gonna document history from a neutral perspective, because that's one of the reasons why I like doing shoot interviews. WWE puts out some great DVDs. I've seen some of them, like their documentary DVDs. But of course, they're all going to be from the WWE's perspective. So for us, I like to put out more neutral. We'll get things from both sides. For instance, Ole Anderson. We've had a bunch of people who've had nothing but negative to say about Ole Anderson. And we've also posted a bunch of people recently who have said great things about Ole Anderson. So I like to get both sides of it. So there'll be a lot of history documentation, and of course bigger and bigger shoot interviews, and more matches of better and better wrestlers. We're not only filming Great North Wrestling matches now, but we recently film some from other companies, and we're been given permission to post those too. So I think we may go to other events and just be a neutral channel, which I think is good. The Hannibal TV, it might be the official YouTube channel of Great North Wrestling, but we will become the official YouTube channel of other companies as well, hopefully in the future.
What do you hope to accomplish with these shoot interviews?
As I said, just to document history, and also, as I said, it appears I may be blackballed from the wrestling business. That's what it appears. So I don't have a university education, so this may be I have a lot of knowledge of pro wrestling. I've read ridiculous amounts of books. I guess I watch and follow a bit of MMA, but I really don't follow any other sports. I really don't have many other interests other than working out and martial arts and stuff that's related to wrestling. So this is a good genre, even acting, I guess. I have some interest in acting too. So the interviews, there's a good genre to put my knowledge to good use of all this knowledge I've gained over the years being a huge wrestling fan.
And you mentioned getting into acting. What has that experience been like, and would you like to pursue that as a career, a potential career in the future?
Yes, I don't think I'll be doing any Shakespearean plays or anything, but I have done more and more acting gigs lately, and some bigger than others. But I'm good at stunts, I've found, and I really enjoy acting. And actually, I've found that I get as much satisfaction out of acting as I do from wrestling, and in some cases even more, because in fight scenes and acting, I just find that they're so appreciative of what you do. Whereas wrestling, you don't really get much appreciation for the punishment you put your body through. So I could see that being something I do more and more in the future as well. I certainly enjoy it a lot.
So before we wrap it up, you're known for some pretty controversial events over the years, and probably the most well-known event was with Terry Funk and Thunder Bay, where you guys got into a scuffle, I guess you could say. So what are your thoughts on that event?
That was we had a huge crowd for that event. That was a press conference incident. It's actually on the Hannibal TV. There's different versions of it too. There's a story version, there's an uncut version, there's the DVD version that you actually put out on the This Is Hannibal original DVD. All I can say is that was a lot of fun. Things got out of hand, but people forget that he actually smashed a glass picture frame over my head. That's very dangerous. All I ever hear from people is, how could you hit Terry Funk like that? But give me a break. A glass picture frame smashed over my head, that can do a lot more damage than a slap. So I don't think it's over between Terry and I have since challenged him to a 72-ounce steak eating contest in his hometown of Amarillo, because he's too chicken to come to Canada to face me again. And okay, he's too afraid to wrestle me. That's fine. He may actually be retired now. That was definitely the last big angle that he did in his career, because he hasn't surpassed that since, and it has literally hundreds of thousands of hits. Many different versions have huge hits. But yeah, I would say that I'll face him off in a 72-ounce steak eating contest, and I'll beat him at that too. He's been telling people for years at this big Texan steakhouse that he's eaten the steak, but the owner of the steakhouse personally told me, Robert E. Lee personally told me, Terry, that he's your neighbor, and he's sick and tired of every time people are coming in saying Terry Funk's told him that he's eaten the steak, but you never have eaten the steak. So let's put your money where your mouth is. You and me, face to face. We're going to see if you can eat the 72-ounce steak. I know I can, and we're going to see what happens in Amarillo in the near future.
So one other person you've had a feud with is the Macho Man's brother, the genius Lanny Poffo. You end up getting into a fight
It's
backstage.
not always, that's a gimmick, as he'll remind you many times. He's not actually a genius, as that fight actually showed. But yeah, that was one of the incidents that actually we were lucky to capture on tape, because that was during the time of the filming of the documentary when we had cameras on us pretty much at all times for years there. And I guess what happened basically is an unfortunate situation. I didn't know this. He had flown into Maine and been driven to this town that was in New Brunswick is rural enough, but this was even in more rural New Brunswick. He had to literally take dirt roads to get to this place. So he'd flown from Florida to somewhere in Maine and then been driven like 2.5 hours through dirt roads to get to this place. And they had lost his luggage in Maine. So the only clothes he had for the 2 or 3 days he was there were the clothes he was wearing. And I had only just arrived shortly before the show too. I really hadn't been paying much attention to Lanny. I was wrestling that night. I really didn't care, really, to be honest with you, about Lanny. I was just focused on doing what I was there to do, wrestle. And during the course of the match, I didn't realize this was the only clothes he had and the only shirt that he had for the trip. I ripped his shirt off. I didn't know even why he was in the ring in his clothes. Lanny is a strange guy. The first time I was ever on a card with him, he actually wrestled barefoot with no wrestling boots on. So, like, him standing in the ring in street clothes isn't that weird to me. But unfortunately, yeah, I ripped his shirt. I understand why he was mad about that. The match was rough. It might not be what he's used to, but he agreed to the match. And then something took place backstage, just on the internet. I don't really want to get into it. But basically, Lanny ended up throwing a temper tantrum out of it. Big thing occurred. We were fine. We made up. Then it came out on the internet, and he was mad at me again because the video came out on the internet. But now it appears that we're not really friends anymore, but I don't think he hates me anymore, and we're kind of neutral to each other again. So.
And
he's a good poet. I will admit that he's a good poet, and he is comical in his own way.
Would you see yourself having another match with him to resolve
I
this?
know for a fact he will never have another match with me. He said that the next day, actually, we had to wrestle, and it was a tag team match, and he would not. I think for the short time I was in the ring with him, he just grabbed the bottom rope and basically wouldn't let me pull him away from the rope. I didn't want him to throw another tantrum, so I wasn't too rough with him. I pretty much let the other guy wrestle with him, and I was in there with Honky Tonk Man. He was the one taking the beating that night. But he told me he's never getting in the ring with me ever again, and he's under no circumstances. So that's never going to happen.
So just to wrap it up, how do you want to be remembered?
Well, I can't really answer that question because my career is not even anywhere near its peak. So I don't know what I'm going to be doing in the future. What I've done so far is just a drop in a grain of salt, really. A grain of sand, actually, in the Sahara Desert, compared to what I probably will accomplish in my life. So I can't answer that for now.
What could fans expect from Hannibal?
Lots of entertainment in my matches, better and better matches, more violent matches, more, if it's even possible, harder hitting matches against stars, big names in the wrestling business, and great interviews, better and better interviews.
Well, thank you for joining us. Where could your fans follow you? Where could they contact you? Or
TheHannibalTV.com is my website, I guess, and it's all the YouTube information on there, all the social media links are on there. YouTube, The Hannibal TV, the #1 pro wrestling YouTube channel in Canada. You got to subscribe to that. You don't have to be in Canada. You could be anywhere in the world and subscribe to that. We're giving out great free content, which you can't ask for anything better than that. And Devin Hannibal, that's my Twitter. I'm still mastering Twitter. And all the other social media links are on that TheHannibalTV.com website. That's TheHannibalTV.com.
Thank you for joining us.